When a $400 million deal dies in 5 hours, someone always pays the price. At Gate 7 of Crestline Aviation, a $12 million private jet sits completely grounded. The CEO paces. The engineers panic. And somewhere in the shadows, a man nobody notices is about to prove that the most dangerous thing in any crisis isn't the broken machine, it's the broken people trying to fix it. This is that story. If you want to see how far desperation can push the powerful and how far talent can hide in plain sight, stay until the end. Drop a like, comment your city, and let's see how far this one travels. The fluorescent lights inside Crestline Aviation's private terminal hummed like dying wasps. It was 5:14 a.m., and Vanessa Whitmore stood at the floor-to-ceiling window overlooking Gate 7, watching her entire empire teeter on the edge of collapse. Her reflection stared back at her, sharp suit, sharper jaw, eyes that hadn't slept in 36 hours. She pressed one palm flat against the cold glass. Outside, under the pale wash of runway lights, her Gulfstream G650 sat silent and useless, surrounded by a swarm of mechanics who looked like they were performing an autopsy. "Still nothing?" she asked without turning around. Behind her, Marcus Chen, her COO and the man she'd trusted with her company's operations for the last 3 years, cleared his throat. "They're working on it." "That's not an answer." "It's the only one I have right now." Vanessa turned. Marcus stood near the leather chairs, tablet in hand, his expression carefully neutral. Too neutral. She'd known him long enough to recognize when he was hiding something, and right now his face was a vault. "The meeting starts in 11 hours, she said. "Tokyo's not going to wait. Ichiro Takahashi doesn't do second chances." "I'm aware." "Are you?" Her voice dropped into the register she reserved for boardrooms and bad news. "Because if we miss this window, Nakamura Corp will close with Zentix instead. $400 million walks out the door, and we lose the entire Pacific Rim expansion. That's not a setback, Marcus. That's an extinction-level event." He shifted his weight. The engineer said, "I don't care what the engineer said. I care what they can do." She crossed the terminal in 4 strides, stopping close enough to see the faint stubble on his jaw. "Fix it. I don't care if you have to fly someone in from Seattle or pull a retired specialist out of a fishing boat. That plane takes off in 3 hours, or we're finished." Marcus met her eyes for exactly 2 seconds before looking away. "I'll see what I can do." He left without another word. Vanessa returned to the window. Outside, the sky was still dark, but the horizon was starting to bleed purple. Dawn was coming whether she was ready or not. Her phone buzzed. She pulled it from her pocket. "Dad, just saw the news. Merger today?" She stared at the message. Didn't reply. Her father had built Whitmore Industries from nothing, a shipping company that grew into a logistics empire before she took over and pivoted into aviation and tech. He'd handed her the keys 5 years ago with one piece of advice. Don't let anyone see you sweat. She hadn't. Not once. But standing here, watching her $12 million aircraft fail its pressure tests for the 4th time in 2 hours, she could feel the moisture gathering at the base of her spine. 1. Down in the hangar, Tom Rivas wiped his forehead with the back of his hand and stared at the diagnostic screen like it had personally insulted his mother. "Still showing fault code P7629, he muttered. Beside him, Sarah Nguyen, lead mechanic, and the only person on the night shift with an actual sense of humor, leaned over his shoulder. "That's the same code we've been chasing since 3 a.m. "I know. And we've replaced the valve." "I know. And recalibrated the sensors." "Sarah, I swear, just saying." She stepped back, pulling off her gloves. "Maybe the system's lying to us." "Systems don't lie. They just fail in really inconvenient ways." Tom stood up, stretching his back until something popped. Around him, the hangar stretched out like a cathedral built for machines. High ceilings, steel scaffolding, the faint smell of hydraulic fluid and jet fuel. Normally, he loved this place. Right now, it felt like a tomb. "What do we tell the boss?" Sarah asked. Tom didn't answer. Across the hangar, Marcus Chen was walking toward them, his shoes clicking against the concrete like a countdown timer. "Update," Marcus said when he reached them. Not a question. A command. Tom straightened. "We've isolated the fault to the pressure control system, replaced the primary valve, ran a full diagnostic, recalibrated the sensors. Pressure's still fluctuating outside acceptable range. So, fix it.
We're trying, but if the valve replacement didn't solve it, we might be looking at a deeper issue. Could be the controller itself, or how long? Tom hesitated. If we have to pull the controller and send it out for testing, hours or days, Tom? Days. Maybe a week if we have to order parts. Marcus's jaw tightened. For a moment, Tom thought he saw something flicker across the man's face. Relief? But it was gone before he could be sure.
Keep working, Marcus said. I'll inform Ms. Whitmore. He walked away. Sarah waited until he was out of earshot before leaning close.
Is it just me? Or does he seem almost happy we can't fix it? Tom frowned. You're paranoid. Maybe, but I've worked here long enough to know when someone's rooting for failure.
She wasn't wrong. Tom had noticed it too, the way Marcus delivered bad news with just a little too much smoothness, like he'd rehearsed it. But that wasn't his problem. His problem was a $12 million jet that wouldn't hold pressure and a CEO who looked like she'd personally strangle anyone who disappointed her. He turned back to the diagnostic panel, and that's when he noticed the janitor. Checked. Ethan Cade pushed his cleaning cart past the Gulfstream's landing gear, moving slowly, methodically, like a man who'd learned long ago that the best way to be invisible was to never stop working. He wore the same navy blue uniform as every other night shift custodian at Crestline Aviation. Polo shirt with the company logo, dark pants, non-slip shoes that had seen better days. His cart rattled slightly as he moved, the sound swallowed by the cavernous hangar. Nobody looked at him. They never did. Ethan had been working here for 11 months, and in that time he'd learned every corner of this place. He knew which vending machines were broken, which bathrooms the pilots avoided, which mechanics liked their coffee black, and which ones needed 3 sugars just to function. He knew the rhythm of the building, the way the freight elevators groaned at 2 a.m., the way the air conditioning kicked on at 4, the way the whole place went quiet around 5:30, when the graveyard shift started winding down. He also knew airplanes, not the way the mechanics knew them, though he'd been one of those once too. No, Ethan knew aircraft the way a surgeon knew anatomy. He understood the relationships between systems, the way pressure and temperature and airflow all talk to each other in languages most people never learned. He just didn't talk about it anymore. Right now, he was emptying trash cans near the maintenance bay, close enough to hear the engineers arguing, but far enough away that nobody noticed him listening. Can't be the controller, one of them was saying. We tested it twice. Then what? I don't know, but if we don't figure it out soon, someone's getting fired. Ethan paused beside a trash bin, pulling out the bag with slow, deliberate movements. His eyes drifted toward the Gulfstream. Even from here, he could see the problem. It wasn't obvious, not to someone who didn't know where to look, but Ethan had spent 12 years as a certified FAA aviation inspector before everything fell apart, and in that time he'd seen this exact failure mode 3 times. Twice on corporate jets, once on a regional cargo plane in Anchorage. The engineers were chasing the wrong ghost. He tied off the trash bag, set it in his cart, and moved to the next bin. Not my problem, he reminded himself. Not anymore. But by 5:45 a.m., Vanessa was pacing the hangar floor like a caged animal. The engineers had stopped making eye contact with her. Marcus stood off to the side, phone pressed to his ear, presumably trying to find a backup aircraft that didn't exist. The FAA inspector, a grim-faced woman named Patricia Holbrook, sat in a folding chair near the diagnostic station, filling out paperwork that might as well have been a death certificate for Vanessa's merger. Ms. Whitmore. Vanessa turned. Tom Rivas stood there, grease on his hands, defeat in his eyes. We've done everything we can, he said. The system's still failing. I'm sorry. Don't apologize. Fix it. I can't. He gestured toward the plane. Whatever's wrong, it's deeper than we can diagnose in the time we have. If you want this aircraft airborne today, you'll need to charter something else. There is nothing else. Every jet within range is booked or grounded for maintenance. She ran a hand through her hair, feeling the carefully constructed armor of her composure start to crack. So what are you telling me? That a $12 million aircraft just doesn't work? Tom said nothing. Vanessa looked past him toward the Gulfstream. The plane sat there like a monument to her failure. Sleek, expensive, and completely useless. Her phone buzzed again. She didn't check it. There has to be something, she said quietly. Some option we haven't considered. Ma'am, we've tried. Then try again. Tom opened his mouth to respond, but before he could, a voice cut through the hangar from somewhere behind them. You're fixing the wrong part. Everyone turned. Standing near the edge of the maintenance bay, still holding a trash bag, was the janitor. For a long moment, nobody spoke. Ethan realized with a sinking feeling in his chest that he'd just made a terrible mistake. He'd meant to stay quiet. He'd meant to finish his shift, clock out, and pick up Emma from his neighbor's apartment like he did every morning. He'd meant to keep his head down and his mouth shut, because that was the deal he'd made with himself after everything fell apart. But watching these people chase the wrong problem for 3 hours had finally broken something inside him. Tom Rivas stared at him like he'd just sprouted a second head. Excuse me? Ethan set down the trash bag. The pressure fault. You're replacing the wrong component. Sarah Nguyen stepped forward, her expression somewhere between confusion and irritation. Who the hell are you? Night shift, Ethan said. Custodial. Custodial, she repeated slowly, like she was testing the word for hidden meaning. So you're a janitor? Yeah. And you're telling us, certified A and P mechanics with a combined 40 years of experience, that we don't know how to fix an airplane? Ethan hesitated. This was the moment. He could backpedal, apologize, fade back into the background. That's what the smart move was. But then he looked at the Gulf Stream again, and he thought about the CEO he'd seen through the terminal window, the woman who looked like she was holding the weight of the world on her shoulders. He thought about the meeting in Tokyo, the merger, the $400 million hanging in the balance. And he thought about Emma, who'd asked him last week why he didn't work with airplanes anymore. The valve you replaced is fine, he said. The problem's in the gasket assembly behind the pressure controller. It's warped, probably from thermal cycling. When the system heats up, the gasket expands unevenly and creates a pressure leak the sensors can't isolate. Dead silence. Tom's expression shifted from irritation to something closer to disbelief. How would you know that? Because I've seen it before. Where? In a YouTube video? Anchorage, 2019. Regional Cargo 737. Same fault code, same symptoms. Mechanics chased it for 2 days before someone thought to check the gasket assembly. Ethan paused. I was the inspector who signed off on the repair. The silence stretched. Sarah broke it first. You were an FAA inspector? Was. What happened? I stopped being one. It wasn't an answer, but it was all he was willing to give. Tom exchanged a glance with Sarah, then looked back at Ethan. Even if you're right, and I'm not saying you are, the gasket assembly is buried deep in the system. We'd have to disassemble half the pressure controller to even reach it. I know. That's hours of work. 3 hours if you know what you're doing, less if you've done it before. And you've done it before? Ethan met his eyes. Yeah. Another silence. Then a new voice cut through the hangar, cold, sharp, and used to getting answers. What's going on here? Ethan turned. Vanessa Whitmore stood 10 feet away, arms crossed, her expression somewhere between exhausted and lethal. Up close, she was smaller than he'd expected, maybe 5'6" in heels, but she carried herself like someone who'd learned early that presence mattered more than size. Tom straightened. Ms. Whitmore, this is, the janitor, she finished. Her eyes locked onto Ethan. I heard. You think you know what's wrong with my plane? Yes. Why should I believe you? Fair question. Ethan glanced down at his uniform, the logo, the cart, the trash bag still sitting at his feet. He knew how this looked. He knew what she saw when she looked at him. You shouldn't, he said. But you're out of options, and I'm right. Vanessa studied him for a long moment. Behind her, Marcus Chen had appeared from somewhere, his expression unreadable. Ms. Whitmore, Marcus said carefully, we should discuss this privately. She ignored him. What's your name? Ethan Cade. How long have you worked here, Ethan? 11 months. And before that? He hesitated. Different life. That's not an answer. It's the only one you're getting. Her eyes narrowed. Most people wilted under that look. Ethan just stood there, hands at his sides, waiting. Finally, she turned to Tom. If he's right, If the problem is this gasket thing, can you fix it in time? Tom looked uncomfortable. If he's right, maybe. But Ms. Whitmore, with all respect, we don't know this guy. He could be... Right, Vanessa interrupted. He could be right. And if he is, we fly to Tokyo. If he's wrong, we're exactly where we are now. Grounded, broke, and out of time. She looked back at Ethan. How confident are you? 90%. Not 100? Nothing's 100%. But I've been doing this long enough to know the difference between a guess and a diagnosis. Vanessa was quiet for a moment. Then she pulled out her phone, checked the time, and swore under her breath. Fine, she said. You've got 3 hours. Fix my plane. Tom started to protest. Ma'am, we can't just... 3 hours? Vanessa repeated. If he's wrong, we lose nothing. If he's right, we save everything. She looked at Ethan again. Don't make me regret this. Ethan nodded once. Marcus stepped forward, his voice low and urgent. Vanessa, this is insane. You're trusting a janitor over certified engineers. I'm trusting someone who actually knows what the problem is, she said. Now either help or get out of the way. Marcus's jaw tightened, but he said nothing. Vanessa turned and walked away, her heels clicking against the concrete. Ethan stood there for a moment, feeling the weight of every pair of eyes in the hangar. Then he looked at Tom. I'm going to need tools. Yes. 20 minutes later, Ethan was inside the Gulfstream's belly, elbow deep in the pressure control system. The mechanics had given him space, partly out of professional courtesy, mostly out of morbid curiosity. Sarah handed him tools when he asked for them, but didn't speak. Tom stood off to the side, arms crossed, watching with the expression of a man waiting for a disaster. Patricia Holbrook, the FAA inspector, had moved closer. She didn't interfere, but she didn't leave either. Ethan worked in silence, his hands moving with a precision that came from years of muscle memory. The system was exactly as complicated as he'd remembered. Layers of housings, connectors, sensors, all packed into a space barely large enough for a human arm. But he knew this design. He'd certified dozens of these systems back when he still had a career. Hand me the 7mm socket, he said without looking up. Sarah passed it to him. He loosened the housing, eased it back, and there, buried behind the pressure controller, almost invisible unless you knew where to look, was the gasket assembly. And it was warped. Not dramatically. Just enough to create an intermittent seal that would fluctuate under pressure, tripping the sensors and grounding the aircraft. There, Ethan said quietly. Tom leaned in, squinting. I'll be damned. Sarah moved closer. Is that? Thermal warping, Ethan confirmed. Probably happened gradually over the last few months. Gasket expands when the system heats up, contracts when it cools. Eventually it loses integrity. He glanced at Tom. You have a replacement? Tom blinked. Maybe. I'd have to check inventory. Check. Tom disappeared. Ethan carefully extracted the warped gasket, holding it up to the light. The damage was subtle, a slight deformation along one edge, barely visible to the naked eye. But in a system where pressure tolerances were measured in fractions of a PSY, subtle was enough to kill. Patricia Holbrook stepped closer. You were right. Yeah. That's not an easy call to make. Ethan didn't respond. He set the gasket aside and started inspecting the housing for any additional damage. I don't recognize you, Patricia continued. What district did you work out of? Seattle, long time ago. How long? Long enough that it doesn't matter. She studied him for a moment, then nodded slowly. Fair enough. Tom returned carrying a small plastic case. Found one. Last one in stock. Ethan opened the case, inspected the new gasket, and nodded. This'll work. He set to work installing it, cleaning the housing, applying a thin layer of sealant, positioning the gasket with the kind of care most people reserved for surgery. Around him, the hangar had gone quiet. Even the mechanics who'd been skeptical were watching now, drawn by the strange sight of a janitor performing precision aircraft repair like he'd been doing it his whole life. Because he had. 40 minutes later, Ethan sealed the final housing, reconnected the sensors, and backed out of the access panel. Run the test, he said. Tom moved to the diagnostic station. His fingers flew across the keyboard, pulling up the pressure system interface. The screen flickered, numbers scrolling past. Everyone watched. The readout stabilized, green across the board. Tom stared at the screen. Pressure's holding, fluctuations gone. Systems, it's perfect. Sarah let out a breath she'd been holding. Holy shit. Patricia Holbrook made a note on her clipboard. I'll need to run a full FAA compliance check before I sign off, but based on what I'm seeing, you're clear. Ethan stood up, wiping his hands on a rag. Every muscle in his back ached. He'd forgotten how uncomfortable it was working inside those access panels. Tom walked over, his expression caught somewhere between respect and disbelief. Where the hell did you learn to do that? Practice, Ethan said. That's not... Tom stopped, shook his head. You know what? I don't care. You just saved our asses. Ethan didn't respond. He was already thinking about Emma, about getting home, making breakfast, getting her to school on time. The familiar rhythm of his real life, the one that didn't involve $12 million aircraft and desperate CEOs. I should go, he said. Wait. Sarah stepped forward. Seriously, who are you? Nobody important. That's crap. Nobody fixes a Gulfstream pressure system like that without serious training. Ethan met her eyes. I used to do this for a living. Now I don't. That's all you need to know. He walked away before she could ask anything else. Vanessa was standing near the terminal window when Marcus found her. It's fixed, he said. She turned. What? The janitor. He found the problem, replaced some gasket. FAA's running final tests now, but it looks like we're clear. Vanessa stared at him. You're joking. I wish I was. Marcus's expression was carefully blank. Apparently, he used to be an FAA inspector, diagnosed the whole thing in 5 minutes, fixed it in under an hour. For a moment, Vanessa couldn't speak. Relief and disbelief crashed together in her chest, leaving her dizzy. So we can fly? She managed. Looks like it. She closed her eyes, breathed. When she opened them again, Marcus was watching her with an expression she couldn't quite read. Where is he? She asked. Who? The janitor. Ethan. I don't know. Probably clocked out already. Find him. Marcus hesitated. Vanessa. Find him, Marcus. I want to thank him. Something flickered across Marcus's face. Annoyance, maybe, or something deeper. But he nodded and pulled out his phone. Vanessa turned back to the window. Outside, the first real light of dawn was breaking across the runway, turning the sky from purple to gold. Her plane was fixed. Her merger was back on. And somewhere in this building was a man who just saved her entire company while pushing a mop. She needed to know who he was. And more importantly, she needed to know why someone with that kind of skill was working the night shift as a janitor. Ethan was halfway to the employee parking lot when his phone buzzed. He pulled it out, expecting a text from his neighbor, Mrs. Chen, about Emma. Instead, it was an unknown number. Unknown. Ms. Whitmore would like to speak with you before you leave. Terminal B, second floor. Ethan stopped walking. He looked at the message for a long moment, then at the exit 50 feet away. He could leave. Clock out, walk away. Pretend this morning never happened. But something stopped him. Maybe it was the memory of Vanessa's face when she'd made the call to trust him. Maybe it was the small, stupid part of him that still remembered what it felt like to be good at something that mattered. Or maybe he was just tired of running. He turned around and walked back inside. Yes. Vanessa was waiting in a small private lounge on the second floor. Leather chairs, coffee service, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the runway. She stood when Ethan entered. Thank you for coming, she said. Ethan stopped a few feet inside the door. You wanted to see me. I wanted to thank you. What you did this morning... She paused, choosing her words carefully. You saved my company. I don't say that lightly. You're welcome. Silence. Vanessa gestured to the chairs. Sit, please. Ethan hesitated, then sat. Vanessa took the chair across from him. I need to ask you something, she said, and I need you to be honest. Okay? Who are you? Ethan almost smiled. You already know my name. That's not what I'm asking. She leaned forward slightly. I just watched you repair a complex aircraft system in under an hour. My engineers couldn't figure out what was wrong in 3. You're not just some guy who used to work in aviation, so I'll ask again. Who are you? Ethan looked at her for a long moment. Then he told her. Not everything. not the parts that still hurt too much to say out loud. But enough. He told her about Seattle, about the 12 years he spent as an FAA inspector, about the hundreds of aircraft he'd certified. He told her about the reputation he'd built, the guy who could diagnose a system failure just by listening to the engine, who could spot a dangerous modification from across a hangar. And he told her about the day it all ended. There was a regional carrier, he said quietly. Small operation, but growing fast. They brought in a used 737, wanted it certified for passenger service. I did the inspection. Vanessa listened without interrupting. I found problems, Ethan continued. Structural fatigue in the wing mounts. Nothing catastrophic yet, but enough that I couldn't sign off on it. I told them it needed repairs before it could fly passengers. And they didn't want to pay for repairs, Vanessa guessed. They wanted me to approve it anyway, said the fatigue was minor, said it was safe enough, said I was being overcautious. He looked down at his hands. My supervisor agreed with them, told me to sign the paperwork. But you didn't. No, because 3 months earlier a plane with similar fatigue had gone down in Alaska. 12 people died. I wasn't going to let that happen again. Vanessa's expression softened. So you refused? I refused. Filed a formal objection, went over my supervisor's head, made a lot of noise. Ethan's jaw tightened. The carrier withdrew their application. My supervisor filed a complaint against me for obstructing legitimate business operations. The FAA opened an investigation. Did they fire you? No. But they made it clear I wasn't welcome anymore. Transferred me to a desk job in Spokane. Buried me in paperwork. I lasted 6 months before I quit. He paused. My wife died 2 months later, car accident. I had a 6-year-old daughter and no job. So I moved here, took the first thing I could find, and tried to build something stable. The lounge was very quiet. Vanessa sat back in her chair. I'm sorry. Don't be. I made my choices. You made the right choice. Ethan looked up at her. Tell that to my bank account. She almost smiled. How old is your daughter now? 6. Emma. She's with a neighbor right now, probably eating cereal and watching cartoons. Does she know what you used to do? She knows I used to work with airplanes. She doesn't know why I stopped. He stood. I should go. She'll be wondering where I am. Vanessa stood as well. Wait. Ethan paused. She pulled a business card from her pocket and held it out. I'm serious about thanking you. If you ever decide you want to come back to aviation, really come back, call me. Ethan looked at the card but didn't take it. I appreciate the offer, he said, but I'm done with that world. Are you? Because from where I'm standing, you just spent an hour proving otherwise. That was a one-time thing. Was it? She studied him. You knew exactly what was wrong with that plane the moment you saw it. You diagnosed a problem my entire engineering team missed. That's not something you forget how to do. That's who you are. Ethan said nothing. Vanessa set the card on the table between them. Keep it, just in case. She walked to the door, then paused and looked back. For what it's worth, she said, the world needs people who won't sign off on unsafe aircraft, even when it costs them everything. Then she left. Ethan stood there for a long moment, staring at the business card. Then he picked it up, slipped it into his pocket, and walked out into the early morning light. Emma Cade was still in her pajamas when Ethan walked through the door of Mrs. Chen's apartment at 6:47 a.m. She sat cross-legged on the carpet, a bowl of half-eaten Cheerios balanced in her lap, watching some cartoon about talking dogs who solved mysteries. Daddy! She scrambled to her feet, nearly spilling milk everywhere. Ethan caught the bowl just in time. Easy, Bug. What'd I tell you about the cereal? Keep it on the table. She wrapped her arms around his waist. But the good part was on. Mrs. Chen appeared from the kitchen, wiping her hands on a dish towel. She was 73, spoke with an accent that got thicker when she was annoyed, and had been watching Emma 3 mornings a week since Ethan started night shift. She's been up since 6, Mrs. Chen said. Wouldn't eat until the show started. Thanks, Mrs. Chen. I'm sorry I'm late. Late? She glanced at the clock. You're never late. Usually here by 6:30. Ethan set Emma's bowl on the coffee table. Long morning? Mrs. Chen studied him with the kind of look that saw too much. You look tired. I'm always tired. More tired. She handed him a paper bag. Kanji. Still warm. You eat, then take this one home before she drives me crazy with questions about airplanes. Emma tugged on Ethan's sleeve. Did you see any planes take off? A few. Big ones? Pretty big. Did you... Emma, Ethan ruffled her hair. Go get dressed. We need to get you to school. She groaned but obeyed, padding down the hallway to the spare bedroom where she kept a change of clothes. Mrs. Chen waited until she was out of earshot. Something happened. It wasn't a question. Ethan sighed. Just a weird night. Weird how? He thought about the Gulf Stream, about Vanessa Whitmore's face when the diagnostic finally came back green, about the business card sitting in his pocket like a live grenade. Doesn't matter, he said. Mrs. Chen made a sound that suggested she didn't believe him, but she didn't push. That was one of the things Ethan appreciated about her. She knew when to ask and when to let things sit. 20 minutes later, he and Emma were in his truck heading toward her elementary school. The morning traffic was picking up, but they had time. Emma sat in the back seat, her stuffed bear, Mr. Buttons, named during a phase when everything needed a proper title, buckled in beside her. Mrs. Chen made weird breakfast again, Emma announced. Congie's not weird. It's rice porridge. It's weird. It's what she grew up eating, and it's good for you. Emma made a face. You say that about everything. Because it's true about everything. She kicked her feet against the seat. Can we have waffles tomorrow? Maybe. Real waffles? Not the frozen kind? Ethan glanced at her in the rear-view mirror. What's wrong with frozen waffles? They taste like cardboard. Since when do you know what cardboard tastes like? Since you keep making frozen waffles. Despite everything, Ethan smiled. This was his favorite part of the day. The 20-minute drive to school, just the two of them, Emma's running commentary filling the truck cab like background music. How was your night? She asked. Quiet. Did you clean stuff? Yep. That sounds boring. It is boring. Then why do you do it? Ethan braked at a red light. Because boring pays the bills. Emma was quiet for a moment. Then, did you fix any airplanes? His hands tightened on the steering wheel. What? Airplanes. Did you fix any? You used to fix them, right? Who told you that? Nobody. I just remember. You used to come home smelling like, I don't know, oil, and you had pictures of planes in your office. The light turned green. Ethan drove. I didn't fix them, he said carefully. I inspected them, made sure they were safe. That's almost the same thing. Not really. Do you miss it? The question hung in the air between them. Ethan pulled into the school parking lot, found a spot near the drop-off zone. He put the truck in park but didn't turn off the engine. Sometimes, he admitted. Emma unbuckled her seatbelt and leaned forward between the front seats. Then why don't you do it anymore? Because I made the right choice, and it destroyed my career. Because your mother died, and I fell apart. Because I'm terrified that if I go back, I'll mess it up again and lose the only thing I have left. Because this job gives me mornings with you, Ethan said instead. Emma seemed to consider this. Then she kissed his cheek, grabbed Mr. Buttons, and climbed out of the truck. Love you, Daddy. Love you too, Bug. Have a good day. She ran toward the school entrance, her backpack bouncing. Ethan watched until she disappeared inside, then sat there for another minute, engine idling, staring at nothing. His phone buzzed. He pulled it out, expecting a reminder about rent or a grocery list he'd forgotten to write down. Instead, it was a text from a number he didn't recognize. Unknown. This is Marcus Chen, COO at Whitmore Industries. Ms. Whitmore asked me to reach out. We'd like to discuss a potential opportunity. Are you available this afternoon? Ethan stared at the message. Then he deleted it and drove home. By noon, Vanessa was somewhere over the Pacific Ocean, halfway to Tokyo, and trying very hard not to think about the janitor who'd saved her company. She sat in the Gulfstream's main cabin, laptop open, reviewing the merger documents for the 14th time. Across from her, Marcus worked on his own tablet, his expression focused and unreadable. They'd taken off 40 minutes late, but they were still on schedule to land with 3 hours to spare before the meeting. The repair had held. The FAA had signed off. Everything was fine. So why did Vanessa feel like she was forgetting something important? You're staring, Marcus said without looking up. She blinked. What? You've been reading the same paragraph for 5 minutes. Vanessa closed her laptop. Just tired. You're always tired. Occupational hazard. Marcus set down his tablet and leaned back in his seat. Can I ask you something? That depends on the question. Why did you trust him? Vanessa didn't need to ask who he meant. Because he was right. You didn't know that when you made the call. No, but I knew my engineers were out of options, and I knew we'd lose everything if that plane didn't fly. She met his eyes. Sometimes you have to take a risk. That wasn't a risk. That was desperation. Maybe, but it worked. Marcus was quiet for a moment. Did you look into him after? I tried. Found his employment record at Crestline, but nothing before that. No social media, no public profiles. It's like he didn't exist until 11 months ago. That's strange. Or intentional. Vanessa picked up her coffee, found it cold, set it back down. He told me he used to be an FAA inspector in Seattle. Lost his job after refusing to certify an unsafe aircraft. Marcus raised an eyebrow. He told you that? I asked. He answered. And you believe him? Why would he lie? Why would an FAA inspector be working as a janitor? Fair question. Vanessa had been asking herself the same thing all morning. He has a daughter, she said. 6 years old. Wife died a few years ago. Maybe he just needed something stable. Or maybe he's running from something. Vanessa looked at him. You don't trust him. I don't trust anyone I can't vet. Marcus picked up his tablet again. But it doesn't matter. He fixed the plane. We're in the air. The merger's back on track. Whatever his story is, it's not our problem. Vanessa wanted to argue, but she couldn't find the words. Marcus was right. Ethan Cade's past wasn't her concern. She'd offered him a job. He'd declined. End of story. So why did she keep thinking about the way he'd looked at that business card? Like it was a door he wasn't sure he wanted to open? Her phone buzzed. She glanced at the screen. Marcus Chen. Sent him a message this morning. No response. She looked up. Marcus was watching her. You told me to reach out, he said. I did. He's not interested. Maybe he just needs time. Or maybe he knows his limits. Marcus's expression softened slightly. Vanessa, I get it. He saved the day, but you can't rescue everyone. I'm not trying to rescue him. Then what are you trying to do? Good question. Vanessa looked out the window at the ocean below. Endless blue, no landmarks, nothing to anchor herself to. I don't know, she admitted. Ethan spent the afternoon doing the things he always did when he couldn't sleep. Laundry, dishes, paying bills that were already 2 weeks overdue. He moved through his apartment like a ghost, picking things up and putting them down without really seeing them. The business card sat on the kitchen counter where he'd left it. He'd taken it out of his pocket when he got home, planning to throw it away. But something stopped him. Now it just sat there, white and crisp and impossible to ignore. Around 3 o'clock, his phone rang. He almost didn't answer, but the caller ID said Crestline Aviation, and he thought maybe it was HR calling about a schedule change. Hello? Ethan, it's Sarah from maintenance. Ethan sat down at the kitchen table. Hey, listen, I hope this isn't weird, but I got your number from the employee directory. Wanted to check in. Check in? Yeah, you kind of disappeared this morning after fixing the Gulfstream. Didn't even stick around for the FAA sign-off. Had to pick up my daughter. Right, makes sense. Sarah paused. So here's the thing. Word's spreading about what you did. Tom told the day shift told management, management's asking questions. Ethan closed his eyes. What kind of questions? The kind where they want to know why a janitor has advanced aerospace knowledge and whether they should be paying you more money. I don't want more money. Okay, but they don't know that. And now everyone's curious about who you are and why you're working nights, pushing a broom when you can apparently diagnose pressure system failures faster than certified mechanics. Ethan didn't respond. Listen, Sarah continued, I don't know your story and you don't have to tell me, but people are going to ask, so maybe think about what you want to say. I'll think about it. Good. Another pause. For what it's worth, That was some impressive work this morning. Best repair I've seen in 15 years. Thanks. You ever want to talk shop? I'm around. She hung up. Ethan set the phone down and stared at the business card again. This was the problem with stepping out of the shadows. Once people saw you, they didn't let you disappear again. Chas. Vanessa's meeting with Ichiro Takahashi started at 7 p.m. Tokyo time in a conference room 40 floors above the city. The view was stunning, glass and steel towers stretching toward the horizon, lights beginning to flicker on as dusk settled over the metropolis. Vanessa barely noticed. She sat at the head of a long table, flanked by Marcus and two attorneys she'd flown in from San Francisco. Across from her sat Takahashi and his team, 4 men in identical dark suits, expressions neutral, eyes sharp. Takahashi was 62, silver-haired, and had built Nakamura Corp from a small electronics distributor into a multinational logistics powerhouse. He spoke perfect English but chose his words carefully, like a man who understood that silence was often more powerful than speech. Ms. Whitmore, he said, I'm pleased you could make it. We were concerned when we heard about your aircraft difficulties. Vanessa smiled. A minor technical issue, resolved before departure. I see. Fortunate timing. Very. Takahashi opened a leather portfolio. Shall we begin? For the next 2 hours, they negotiated. Not the broad strokes. Those had been settled weeks ago in preliminary talks. This was the fine print, the details that determined whether $400 million changed hands or disappeared. Vanessa had done this dance 100 times. She knew when to push, when to yield, when to let silence do the work. Marcus handled the technical logistics, the attorneys covered legal exposure, and Vanessa focused on the only thing that mattered, closing the deal. By 9:30, they had a framework. By 10, they had terms. By 10:45, Takahashi was signing the preliminary agreement, and Vanessa was trying very hard not to let the relief show on her face. A successful partnership, Takahashi said, extending his hand. Vanessa shook it. I'm looking forward to working together. As am I. Your reputation precedes you, Ms. Whitmore. They say you are relentless. They're not wrong. Takahashi smiled slightly. Then we will do well together. The meeting ended. Contracts were collected, hands were shaken, polite promises were made about dinner the following evening. Then Vanessa was in the elevator, descending 40 floors, Marcus beside her, and the full weight of what she'd just accomplished finally settling into her bones. We did it, Marcus said quietly. Yeah. 400 million. Yeah. You okay? Vanessa leaned against the elevator wall. Ask me tomorrow. They reached the ground floor, stepped out into the lobby. Outside, Tokyo hummed with late-night energy, neon signs, traffic, people moving through the streets like blood through veins. Marcus's phone buzzed. He checked it, frowned. What? Vanessa asked. Email from Tom Rivas, back at Crestline. About? The janitor. Apparently management's asking questions about him. Vanessa's exhaustion evaporated. What kind of questions? Background check kind of questions. They want to know how he knew what was wrong with the Gulf Stream. And? Marcus scrolled through the email. And they found his FAA records. Turns out he wasn't just an inspector, he was one of the best. Top-rated, multiple commendations, specialist certifications in commercial and private aircraft. He looked up. He also has a formal disciplinary record for refusing to certify an aircraft in 2019. Filed a whistleblower complaint against his supervisor. I know, he told me. Did he tell you the carrier he refused to certify went bankrupt 6 months later? Or that his supervisor was fired for accepting bribes? Vanessa stared at him. What? Marcus handed her his phone. It's all in here. The FAA investigation, the carrier's lawsuit, the whole mess. Ethan Cade didn't just refuse to sign off on a dangerous aircraft. He exposed a corruption scheme that went all the way to the regional director's office. Vanessa read the email, her heart pounding. He destroyed his own career to stop something terrible from happening, she said softly, and then disappeared. Marcus took his phone back. No wonder he's working nights as a janitor. After burning bridges like that, who'd hire him? Vanessa was quiet for a long moment. Then she pulled out her own phone and composed a message. Vanessa Whitmore. The offer still stands. If you want to talk, I'll be back in the States on Wednesday. V. She sent it before she could second-guess herself. Marcus watched her. What are you doing? Something I should have done this morning. Vanessa, I know what you're going to say, that I can't save everyone, that his problems aren't mine, that I should focus on the company. She met his eyes. But he saved us. The least I can do is return the favor. Marcus looked like he wanted to argue. Instead, he just sighed. You're not going to let this go, are you? Would you? He didn't answer. Ethan was reading Emma a bedtime story, something about a bear who learned to share, when his phone buzzed on the nightstand. Emma was already half asleep, her head resting against his shoulder, Mr. Buttons tucked under one arm. She didn't stir when the phone lit up. Ethan reached over carefully, trying not to disturb her, and checked the message. His breath caught. Emma mumbled something in her sleep. Ethan smoothed her hair, waited until her breathing evened out, then gently extracted himself from the bed. He tucked the blankets around her, kissed her forehead, and walked out into the hallway. He read the message again. Then he sat down on the floor, back against the wall, and tried to figure out what the hell he was supposed to do. The smart move was obvious. Ignore the message, keep his head down, maintain the quiet life he'd built. He had Emma, he had a steady paycheck, he had something resembling stability. Why risk that for a world that had already chewed him up and spit him out? But sitting there in the dim hallway, listening to his daughter sleep in the next room, Ethan couldn't stop thinking about this morning. About the way his hands had remembered exactly how to disassemble that pressure controller. About the way the problem had revealed itself like an old friend saying hello. About the way Vanessa Whitmore had looked at him, not like a janitor, but like someone who mattered. His phone buzzed again. He looked down. Sarah Nguyen. Hey, don't know if this helps, but Tom and I were talking. If you ever want to teach some of the newer mechanics, we could use someone who actually knows this stuff. Not a full-time gig, just weekend seminars. Pays decent. Think about it. Ethan stared at the message. 2 offers in one night. 2 doors he'd thought were permanently closed. He thought about Emma's question that morning. Do you miss it? He thought about Mrs. Chen's look. Something happened. He thought about the business card still sitting on his kitchen counter. Then he stood up, walked to his bedroom, and pulled a cardboard box from the back of his closet. He hadn't opened it in 2 years. Inside were things he'd packed away after leaving Seattle. Certificates, commendations, photographs from job sites. Evidence of the person he used to be. At the bottom of the box was a photo he'd forgotten about. It showed him standing in front of a 747 at SeaTac, grinning like an idiot, grease on his hands and pride in his eyes. His wife Rachel stood beside him, her arm around his waist, laughing at something off camera. Ethan traced the edge of the photo with his thumb. I don't know what to do, he whispered to the empty room. The photo didn't answer, but somewhere in his chest something shifted, just barely, just enough to notice. He put the photo back in the box, closed it, and returned it to the closet. Then he walked back to his phone and did something he hadn't done in a very long time. He took a risk. Ethan Cade. Wednesday works. Where and when? He sent the message before he could change his mind. Then he went to check on Emma one more time, found her sprawled across the bed with Mr. Buttons on the floor, and decided that whatever happened next, he'd figure it out. Because maybe Vanessa Whitmore was right. Maybe the world did need people who wouldn't sign off on unsafe aircraft, even when it cost them everything. Precis. Marcus was still awake at midnight, sitting in his hotel room in Tokyo, staring at his laptop screen. On it was Ethan Cade's employment file from Crestline Aviation. Sparse, unremarkable, the kind of background that raised exactly 0 red flags. But Marcus had learned long ago to look deeper. He'd spent the last hour digging through public records, cross-referencing names, following paper trails that most people wouldn't notice. And what he'd found made his stomach tighten. Ethan Cade wasn't just a whistleblower who'd exposed corruption. He was the whistleblower who'd cost Marcus's former employer $3 million in legal settlements. The regional carrier Ethan had refused to certify. Marcus had been on their board of directors. He'd pushed for that aircraft to be approved, had personally vouched for the inspection process, had assured investors it was a sound investment. And then Ethan Cade had torched the whole thing with one formal complaint. Marcus remembered this fallout. The lawsuits, the investigations, the way board members had scattered like rats when the FAA came knocking. He'd barely escaped with his reputation intact. Now, 6 years later, The man who'd destroyed his first real shot at serious money was working as a janitor at the same company where Marcus served as COO, and Vanessa was trying to bring him back. Marcus closed his laptop slowly. He told himself he was over it, that the past was the past, that he'd moved on to bigger and better things. But sitting there in the dark hotel room, watching the Tokyo skyline glitter through the window, Marcus felt something cold settle in his chest. Ethan Cade had cost him once. He wasn't about to let it happen again. Wednesday arrived with rain. Ethan stood outside Whitmore Industries headquarters at 2 in the afternoon, water dripping from his jacket, wondering if he'd made a terrible mistake. The building rose 23 stories above the downtown district, all glass and steel, and the kind of architectural confidence that came from having money to burn. He'd left Emma with Mrs. Chen, who'd asked exactly 0 questions when he said he had an appointment. Just gave him that knowing look and told him to change his shirt because the one he was wearing had a coffee stain on the collar. Now, standing in the rain, Ethan pulled out his phone and checked Vanessa's message one more time. Vanessa Whitmore, main lobby, 2 p.m. Ask for me at reception. Simple, direct, no room for second guessing. Ethan put his phone away and walked inside. The lobby was exactly what he'd expected. Marble floors, modern furniture, a reception desk that looked like it belonged in a spaceship. A young woman behind the desk looked up as he approached, her smile professional and slightly wary. Can I help you? I'm here to see Vanessa Whitmore. 2 o'clock appointment. The receptionist's smile didn't falter, but something shifted in her eyes. Name? Ethan Cade. She typed something into her computer, waited, then nodded. She's expecting you. 22nd floor. Elevators are to your left. Ethan thanked her and walked to the elevators, acutely aware of how out of place he looked. His jeans were clean but worn, his jacket was still dripping water onto the marble, and he was pretty sure his boots squeaked with every step. The elevator ride felt like it took forever. When the doors finally opened on the 22nd floor, he stepped out into a hallway that made the lobby look understated. More glass, more steel, abstract art on the walls that probably cost more than his truck. A woman in her 50s stood waiting near a corner office. She wore a pantsuit that screamed efficiency and glasses that suggested she didn't tolerate nonsense. Mr. Cade? Yeah, I'm Linda Marsh, Miss Whitmore's executive assistant. She's finishing a call, should be just a few minutes. She gestured toward a sitting area. Can I get you anything? Coffee? Water? I'm fine, thanks. Linda nodded and disappeared into an adjacent office. Ethan sat down on a leather chair that was probably worth more than 3 months of his rent and tried not to think about how badly this could go. 5 minutes passed. Then 10. He was starting to wonder if Vanessa had forgotten about him when the office door opened and she stepped out. She looked different than she had at the airport, less frantic, more composed. Her hair was pulled back, her suit was navy blue instead of black, and she moved with the kind of easy confidence that came from owning the building. Ethan. Sorry for the wait. She extended her hand. He stood and shook it. No problem. Come in. Her office was corner-positioned with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. Rain streaked the glass, turning the view into an impressionist painting. A desk dominated one side of the room, but Vanessa led him to a small conference table near the windows. Sit, please. Ethan sat. Vanessa took the chair across from him, and for a moment neither of them spoke. Then Vanessa said, I wasn't sure you'd come. Neither was I. She almost smiled. Fair enough. Can I ask what changed your mind? Ethan looked out at the rain. My daughter asked me if I missed working with airplanes. I told her sometimes. Then I spent 2 days thinking about what that meant. And I'm not sure I have an answer yet. Vanessa nodded slowly. I appreciate the honesty. Why am I here? Ethan asked. You said the offer still stands, but you never actually made an offer. You're right, I didn't. She leaned back in her chair. So here it is. I want to hire you. As what? Head of Aviation Safety and Compliance. Ethan blinked. What? We're expanding our aviation division. New routes, new contracts, more aircraft. I need someone who can oversee safety protocols, manage inspections, and make sure we're not cutting corners. She met his eyes. I need someone who won't sign off on anything unsafe, even when it's expensive, even when it's inconvenient. You need a scapegoat.
I need someone I can trust. Ethan shook his head. You don't know me. I know you diagnosed a pressure system failure in 5 minutes that my entire engineering team missed. I know you fixed it in under an hour. And I know you walked away from a career because you refused to compromise on safety. She paused. That's enough. It's really not. Then tell me what I'm missing.
Ethan was quiet for a long moment. Outside, the rain intensified, hammering against the windows. I have a daughter, he said finally. She's 6. I've been working nights so I can be there when she wakes up, get her to school, pick her up in the afternoon. She's the only thing that matters. This job would be days, standard hours. You'd have weekends. And when there's an emergency, when a plane's grounded and someone needs to fix it at midnight, then we call someone else. You'd be management, Ethan, not a line inspector. I don't want to be management. Vanessa studied him. What do you want? Good question. Ethan wasn't sure he knew anymore. I want my daughter to have a stable life, he said. I want to pay rent on time. I want to not lie awake at 3 a.m., wondering if I made the right choices. And working as a janitor accomplishes that? It's simple. It's safe. Nobody asks questions. It's also a waste of your talent. Ethan looked at her. You sound like my wife. The words came out before he could stop them. Vanessa's expression softened. I'm sorry. About your wife. It was 3 years ago. Car accident. Drunk driver ran a red light. Ethan's jaw tightened. I was in Seattle, at a job site, arguing with my supervisor about that aircraft. She called to tell me she was picking up dinner on her way home. That was the last time I heard her voice. Vanessa didn't say anything. There was nothing to say. I quit the FAA 2 weeks later, Ethan continued. Moved here because it was far enough away from Seattle that I didn't see her everywhere I looked. Got the first job I could find. Built something small and quiet and safe. He met Vanessa's eyes. I'm not trying to be ungrateful, but that life cost me everything once. I'm not sure I can risk it again. Vanessa was quiet for a moment. Then she said, Can I tell you something? Sure. When I took over this company 5 years ago, everyone said I'd fail. That I was too young, too inexperienced, too aggressive. My father had built an empire, and I was just the daughter who'd inherited it. She looked out at the rain. So I worked 16-hour days. I took risks nobody else would take. I made enemies, burned bridges, refused to compromise. She turned back to him. And you know what happened? You succeeded. I survived. There's a difference. She leaned forward slightly. I have more money than I'll ever spend. I have a company that spans 3 continents. I have respect, influence, power. But I don't have a life. I don't have friends. I barely remember the last time I did something that wasn't about work. She paused. You have a daughter who loves you. You have something that matters. I'm not asking you to give that up. I'm asking you to trust that you can have both. Ethan wanted to believe her. He really did. But trust was a luxury he'd stopped being able to afford. I need time to think about it, he said. Vanessa nodded. That's fair. Take the rest of the week. If you're interested, we'll talk details. If not, no hard feelings. She stood. Ethan did the same. For what it's worth, Vanessa said, I think you'd be good at this. And I think it might be good for you too. Maybe. They shook hands again. Ethan walked to the door, then paused. Can I ask you something? Of course. Why me? You could hire anyone, former FAA directors, retired airline executives, consultants with decades of experience. Why a janitor you met once? Vanessa smiled faintly. Because everyone else would tell me what I want to hear. You'd tell me what I need to know. That's worth more than any resume. Ethan didn't have an answer for that, so he just nodded and left. The elevator ride down felt shorter than the ride up. By the time Ethan reached the lobby, the rain had stopped, leaving the streets wet and gleaming. He stood on the sidewalk for a moment, breathing in the damp air, trying to process everything that had just happened. His phone buzzed. Sarah Nguyen. Hey, did you think about the teaching thing? Tom's serious about it. First seminar's Saturday if you're interested. Ethan stared at the message. 2 days ago, he'd been invisible. Now people were offering him jobs, asking for his time, pulling him back toward a world he'd tried so hard to leave behind. He started walking toward his truck, phone still in his hand. Another buzz. Mrs. Chen. Emma wants waffles for dinner. Real ones. I told her to ask you. Despite everything, Ethan smiled. He texted back, "Tell her we'll make them together." Then he drove home, where his daughter was waiting, and tried to figure out what the hell he was going to do with the rest of his life. The apartment was quiet when Ethan walked in. Emma sat at the kitchen table, coloring what appeared to be a very ambitious drawing of a dragon fighting a spaceship. Mr. Button sat propped against her juice box, supervising. "Daddy!" She jumped up, nearly knocking over her crayons. "Mrs. Chen said you had a meeting. Was it important?" Ethan hung up his jacket. "Maybe." "What does maybe mean?" "Means I don't know yet." Emma considered this while returning to her dragon. "Mrs. Chen also said we're making waffles." "We are." "Real ones?" "Real ones." "With chocolate chips?" Ethan raised an eyebrow. "Since when do waffles need chocolate chips?" "Since forever. You just never asked." He couldn't argue with that logic. They spent the next hour making waffles, Emma measuring ingredients with intense concentration, Ethan trying to prevent her from adding an entire bag of chocolate chips to the batter. The kitchen ended up covered in flour, the first batch came out slightly burned, and Emma declared the whole thing the best dinner ever. Later, after she'd gone to bed and the kitchen was mostly clean, Ethan sat at the table with his laptop open and tried to do something he hadn't done in years. Research. He started with Whitmore Industries, pulled up their financial reports, read through press releases, cross-referenced news articles. What he found was impressive: steady growth, smart acquisitions, a reputation for aggressive expansion tempered by solid fundamentals. Then he dug deeper, found the Tokyo merger announcement, the quotes from Vanessa about expanding into Pacific markets, the analyst's predictions about what this meant for the company's future. Then he found something that made him stop, an article from 3 months ago. Headline: Whitmore Industries faces scrutiny after maintenance violations at Regional Hub. Ethan clicked on it. The article detailed a series of maintenance lapses at one of Whitmore's distribution centers. Nothing catastrophic, but enough to trigger an OSHA investigation. The violations had been corrected, fines had been paid, but the article raised questions about whether the company was growing too fast to maintain proper oversight. Vanessa's quote at the end stuck with him. "We take safety seriously and have implemented new protocols to ensure this doesn't happen again." Ethan sat back in his chair. She hadn't mentioned any of this during their meeting, hadn't said anything about safety violations or investigations or protocols that needed fixing. Maybe it wasn't relevant. Maybe it was old news, already handled. Or maybe that's exactly why she wanted to hire him. His phone buzzed. He picked it up, expecting another message from Sarah or Mrs. Chen. Instead, it was from a number he didn't recognize. Unknown. "This is Marcus Chen. We met briefly at the airport. Do you have a few minutes to talk?" Ethan stared at the message, a cold feeling settling in his stomach. He remembered Marcus, the COO, who'd looked almost relieved when the plane was grounded, who'd delivered bad news with too much ease. Whatever Marcus wanted to talk about, Ethan was pretty sure he didn't want to hear it, but ignoring the message felt like the wrong move too. He texted back, "Now?" The response came immediately. "If you're available, I'm in town. Can meet wherever works for you." Ethan looked at his watch. 9:30. Emma was asleep. He could be back in an hour. Against his better judgment, he typed, "There's a diner on 5th and Marion, Angelo's. I'll be there in 20 minutes. Marcus Chen. See you there." Ethan closed his laptop, checked on Emma one more time, and headed back out into the night. Angelo's Diner was exactly the kind of place Ethan had grown to appreciate over the last year. Cheap coffee, decent food, open 24 hours, and staff who didn't ask questions. He'd spent more than a few sleepless nights here after his shift at Crestline, sitting in a corner booth and trying to quiet his thoughts. Marcus was already waiting when Ethan arrived, sitting at a table near the back, still wearing what looked like a very expensive suit. He looked out of place among the truckers and third-shift workers, but he didn't seem bothered by it. Ethan slid into the booth across from him. "Thanks for meeting me," Marcus said. "What's this about?" A waitress appeared, Betty, who'd been working here as long as Ethan had been coming. She refilled Marcus's coffee without asking and looked at Ethan. "Usual?" "Yeah, thanks, Betty." She disappeared. Marcus added sugar to his coffee, stirring slowly. "I'll get straight to it. I know Vanessa offered you a job.
She tell you that? She didn't have to. I know how she thinks. Marcus set down his spoon. And I'm here to tell you it's a bad idea. Ethan leaned back against the vinyl booth. For who? For everyone involved. That's not an answer. Marcus met his eyes. Do you remember a regional carrier called Skybridge Aviation?
The name hit Ethan like a punch to the chest. He kept his expression neutral, but something must have shown because Marcus nodded. I thought so. I was on their board of directors when you filed your complaint. The diner suddenly felt very small. That was 6 years ago, Ethan said carefully. 6 years, 3 months, and about a week. But who's counting? Marcus's smile didn't reach his eyes. I lost a lot of money when that carrier went under. So did a lot of other people. All because you decided one aircraft wasn't quite safe enough. It wasn't safe, period. According to you. According to the FAA investigation that followed. According to the third-party engineers who confirmed the structural fatigue. According to basic physics. Marcus waved a hand dismissively. Details. Point is, you made a choice that cost people their livelihoods. Pilots, mechanics, administrative staff, hundreds of people lost their jobs when Skybridge collapsed. And how many people would have died if that plane had stayed in service? We'll never know, will we? Because you didn't give it a chance. Ethan felt his hands curl into fists under the table. Is there a point to this conversation? The point is that I know who you are. I know what you've done. And I know that hiring you would be a disaster for Whitmore Industries. Marcus leaned forward. Vanessa sees a hero who saved her plane. I see a pattern. You destroyed Skybridge with your righteous crusade. How long before you do the same thing to us? I fixed a pressure system. That's not a crusade. Not yet. But give it a time. Give you some authority, some oversight responsibility, and suddenly you'll be finding problems everywhere. Grounding aircraft, halting operations, costing the company millions because something doesn't meet your impossibly high standards. You mean safety standards. I mean standards that don't account for reality, for budget constraints, for operational demands, for the fact that perfect is the enemy of good enough. Betty returned with Ethan's coffee. She set it down, glanced between them, and walked away without a word. Ethan wrapped his hands around the mug, feeling the heat seep into his palms. Why are you telling me this? He asked quietly. Because I'm trying to save you from making another mistake. You've built a quiet life. You have a daughter who needs you. Walking away from that to work for Vanessa, it won't end well. Sounds like you're more worried about yourself than me. Marcus's expression hardened. I'm worried about the company, about the people who depend on it, about what happens when someone like you decides to play hero again. Someone like me. Someone who thinks he's the only person who cares about doing the right thing. Someone who's willing to burn everything down to prove a point. Ethan set down his coffee. I didn't burn anything down. I refused to sign off on an unsafe aircraft. If that caused problems for you, maybe you should have been more careful about the investments you made. Easy to say when you're not the one losing money. I lost everything. My career, my reputation, my wife. Ethan's voice was quiet but sharp. So don't talk to me about sacrifice. Marcus was silent for a moment. Then he reached into his jacket and pulled out a manila envelope. What's that? Ethan asked. Information about Whitmore Industries. Things Vanessa probably didn't tell you during your interview. He slid the envelope across the table. Ethan didn't touch it. Like what? Like the fact that we're operating on thinner margins than she'd like to admit. Like the fact that the Tokyo merger, while successful, came with obligations that are going to stretch our resources. Like the fact that we can't afford someone coming in and finding expensive problems we don't have the budget to fix right now. So you want me to look the other way if I see something wrong? I want you to understand context, to recognize that sometimes good enough has to be good enough because perfect isn't financially viable. Ethan pushed the envelope back across the table. I'm not interested. You should be. Because if you take this job and start making waves, I'll make sure everyone knows about Skybridge, about the hundreds of people who lost their jobs because of your complaint, about the families you destroyed. I didn't destroy anything. The people taking bribes did that. The court of public opinion doesn't care about nuance. Ethan stood up. We're done here. Think about what I said, Marcus called after him. For your daughter's sake, if nothing else. Ethan didn't respond. He threw a $10 bill on the table for Betty and walked out into the night. The drive home should have been calming, but Ethan's hands shook on the steering wheel. Anger and old grief warred in his chest, making it hard to breathe. He'd spent 3 years trying to outrun his past, 3 years building something small and safe and invisible. And now, in the span of 72 hours, it was all coming back. When he got home, he checked on Emma, still asleep, still peaceful, then sat in the dark living room and tried to think. Marcus's threat was real. Ethan had seen it before, the way people weaponized guilt, twisted narratives to serve their purposes. If he took Vanessa's job and Marcus decided to make good on his warning, it wouldn't matter that Ethan had been right about Skybridge. All that would matter was the story Marcus told. But walking away felt wrong too, like letting fear make his decisions for him. His phone buzzed. Another message. Sarah Nguyen. Seriously, Saturday seminar. Pays $500 for 4 hours. You talk, mechanics listen, everyone learns. What do you say? $500. That was almost 2 weeks' worth of grocery money. And it was just teaching. No inspections, no certifications, no career-ending decisions. Ethan texted back. What time Saturday? Sarah. 10 a.m. Crestline training room. I'll put you on the schedule. He set down his phone and stared at the ceiling. Maybe he didn't have to choose between hiding and jumping back in completely. Maybe there was something in the middle, teaching mechanics, consulting on the side, keeping one foot in aviation without drowning in it. Maybe that was enough. Or maybe he was just afraid of taking the real risk. Thursday morning arrived with clouds, but no rain. Ethan got Emma to school, came home, and tried to sleep. It didn't work. His mind kept circling back to the same questions, the same doubts, the same image of Marcus Chen sliding that envelope across the table. Around noon, his phone rang. Unknown number. He almost didn't answer, then decided he was tired of running from unknowns. Hello? Ethan, it's Patricia Holbrook. It took him a moment to place the name, then he remembered. The FAA inspector from the airport, the one who'd signed off on the Gulfstream repair. Hey, what can I do for you? I heard about Vanessa Whitmore's offer. Wanted to reach out before you made a decision. Ethan sat up. How did you hear about that? Aviation industry's smaller than you think. Word travels. She paused. I also heard Marcus Chen paid you a visit last night. Does everyone know my business? When you fix a $12 million jet at 5 in the morning, people pay attention. Patricia's voice softened. Look, I don't know what Marcus told you, but I remember Skybridge. I was part of the follow-up investigation. Ethan's chest tightened. And? And you were right about everything. The structural fatigue, the bribe scheme, all of it. What you did took guts. A lot of inspectors would have signed off and hoped for the best. A lot of inspectors didn't lose their careers over it. No, but a lot of passengers didn't die in a preventable crash either. She let that sit for a moment. Marcus is protecting his own interests, Ethan. Don't let him convince you that doing the right thing was wrong. Doing the right thing cost me everything. It cost you a career you could rebuild. It saved lives you can't count. Patricia paused. I know that doesn't pay the bills. I know it doesn't make up for what you lost. But it matters. Ethan closed his eyes. Why are you calling me? Because I've seen too many good inspectors get beaten down by a system that values speed over safety. And I've seen what happens when the good ones quit. Her voice firmed. Whatever you decide about Whitmore's offer, do it because you want to, not because Marcus Chen scared you away. She hung up before Ethan could respond. He sat there for a long time, phone in his hand, staring at nothing. Then he made a decision. Not about Vanessa's offer, that still felt too big, too complicated, but about Saturday. About the seminar Sarah had mentioned. He'd teach, he'd share what he knew, and he'd see how it felt to be useful again. After that, he'd figure out the rest. He pulled up Sarah's number and texted, I'm in for Saturday. What do you need me to prepare? The response came fast. Just bring yourself and your knowledge. We'll handle the rest. Ethan set down his phone and went to check the time. 2 hours until he needed to pick up Emma from school. 2 hours to convince himself he wasn't making another mistake. Outside, the clouds broke apart, and for the first time in days, sunlight poured through the windows. It felt like a sign. Ethan wasn't sure if it was a good one or bad one, but he'd take what he could get. Saturday morning came too fast. Ethan woke at 7 to find Emma already awake, sitting on his bed with Mr. Buttons and a very serious expression. You have to teach today, she announced. He rubbed his eyes. How do you know that? Mrs. Chen told me. She said you're going to show airplane people how to fix things. Something like that. Emma studied him with the kind of intensity only 6-year-olds could manage. Are you nervous? A little. Why? You're good at airplanes. I used to be. You still are. You fixed that big plane on Monday. She crawled closer, dragging Mr. Buttons with her. Mrs. Chen says when you're good at something, you don't forget how. It's like riding a bike. Ethan pulled her into a hug. When did you get so smart? I've always been smart. You just don't pay attention. He laughed despite himself. Fair enough. Come on, let's make breakfast before I have to leave. They ate together, scrambled eggs and toast, Emma's preferred Saturday morning meal, and by 8:30 Ethan was showering and trying to remember the last time he'd been this anxious about anything. Teaching wasn't new. He'd done training sessions back in Seattle, led certification courses for junior inspectors, even guest lectured at a community college once. But that was before everything fell apart, before he became someone who pushed a mop instead of making decisions. By 9:15, he was pulling into Crestline Aviation's parking lot, a folder of hastily prepared notes on the passenger seat. Sarah met him at the employee entrance, coffee in hand and a grin on her face. You showed up. I wasn't sure you would. I said I'd be here. Yeah, but people say a lot of things. She handed him the coffee. Black, right? Figured you'd need it. Ethan took it gratefully. How many people are we talking about? 12. Mix of mechanics and junior inspectors. Tom's sitting in too, mostly to make sure nobody asks stupid questions. There are no stupid questions. You haven't met Danny yet. She led him through the building to a training room Ethan had walked past 100 times but never entered. It was smaller than he'd expected. Conference table, whiteboard, projector screen, but the 12 people waiting inside made it feel crowded. Tom stood near the front, arms crossed, looking vaguely protective. The others ranged in age from early 20s to late 50s, all wearing variations of Crestline's maintenance uniform. They watched Ethan enter with expressions that ranged from curious to skeptical. Sarah did quick introductions, names Ethan immediately forgot, faces he tried to memorize, then gestured to the front of the room. All yours. Ethan set down his folder and looked at the group. Nobody spoke. The silence stretched until it became uncomfortable. Then a young guy in the back, Danny, presumably, raised his hand. Is it true you used to be a janitor here? Several people winced. Tom looked like he wanted to throw something. Ethan smiled slightly. Still am, technically. I'm on leave today. But you're also the guy who fixed Ms. Whitmore's Gulfstream. Yeah. In like an hour. Closer to 90 minutes. But yeah. Danny leaned back in his chair. That's insane. It's diagnostic process, which is what we're here to talk about. Ethan moved to the whiteboard. How many of you have chased a fault code for hours only to find out you were fixing the wrong system? Every hand went up. Right, so let's talk about why that happens and how to avoid it. For the next 4 hours, Ethan did something he hadn't done in years. He taught. He walked them through diagnostic frameworks, explained how to read system relationships instead of individual components, demonstrated troubleshooting strategies that went beyond what the manual suggested. He drew diagrams on the whiteboard, fielded questions, and told stories about failures he'd seen and lessons he'd learned the hard way. The skepticism faded after the first hour. By the second hour, people were taking notes. By the third, they were asking follow-up questions that showed they actually understood what he was saying. Tom stopped looking protective and started looking impressed. During the break, Sarah cornered Ethan near the coffee machine. You're really good at this. At what? Teaching. You make complex stuff make sense. That's not a common skill. Ethan refilled his cup. I just explain things the way I wish someone had explained them to me. Well, keep doing it. These guys are actually learning. The second half of the session focused on pressure systems, appropriate given what had brought him here. Ethan walked them through the Gulfstream repair, explained his diagnostic process step by step, and showed them the warped gasket he'd kept as a reference. The mistake most people make, he said, holding up the gasket, is assuming the diagnostic readout tells the whole story. But sensors only report what they can measure. If the problem's causing intermittent failures or manifesting in unexpected ways, the readout will send you in the wrong direction. A woman in her 40s, Linda, maybe, raised her hand. So how do you know when to ignore the readout? You don't ignore it, you contextualize it. Look at the history. When did the fault start? What conditions trigger it? What else was happening with the aircraft at the time? Ethan set down the gasket. Diagnostics is detective work. The readout is one clue, not the answer. By the time he wrapped up at 2 p.m., Ethan was exhausted in a way that felt different from his usual night shift fatigue. This was the kind of tired that came from thinking hard, from being useful, from remembering what it felt like to be good at something. People filed out slowly, several stopping to thank him or ask follow-up questions. Tom clapped him on the shoulder. That was solid. We should do this monthly. Let's see how I survive this one first. Sarah handed him an envelope. Your payment, $500, like I promised. Ethan took it, the weight of it somehow heavier than he'd expected. Thanks. Thank you. Seriously, some of these guys have been stuck in the same troubleshooting patterns for years. You just gave them new tools. After everyone left, Ethan stood alone in the training room, staring at the whiteboard covered in his diagrams and notes. 4 hours ago, this room had felt like a risk. Now it felt like something else, like a door he'd forgotten existed. His phone buzzed. He pulled it out, expecting a message from Mrs. Chen about Emma. Instead, it was Vanessa. Vanessa Whitmore. Heard your seminar went well. Sarah says you're a natural teacher. The offer still stands if you're interested. No pressure. Ethan read the message twice. Then he looked at the whiteboard again, at the envelope in his hand, at the empty room that had been full of people who actually wanted to learn from him. He didn't reply. Not yet. But for the first time since Wednesday, the idea of taking Vanessa's offer didn't feel quite so impossible. Emma was waiting on Mrs. Chen's porch when Ethan pulled up at 3. She ran to the truck before he'd even put it in park, Mr. Buttons tucked under one arm. How was it? She asked, climbing into the back seat. Good. Really good, actually. Did you teach them stuff? I tried. Did they listen? Most of them. Emma buckled her seatbelt. See? I told you you're good at airplanes. Ethan smiled. What do you want to do tonight? Can we get pizza? We had pizza last week. So, pizza's good every week. He couldn't argue with that logic. They picked up pizza from the place near their apartment, thin crust, pepperoni, extra cheese, and ate it on the living room floor while watching a movie about a girl who discovered she could talk to animals. Emma provided running commentary about which animals she'd want to talk to and what she'd ask them. Halfway through the movie, she fell asleep against Ethan's shoulder, pizza sauce on her chin, Mr. Buttons forgotten on the floor. Ethan carried her to bed, cleaned the pizza sauce off her face with a damp washcloth, and tucked her in. She mumbled something about elephants in her sleep. Back in the living room, he cleaned up the pizza boxes and finally allowed himself to think about the message from Vanessa. His laptop was still on the coffee table from earlier in the week. He opened it and stared at the screen, cursor blinking in the search bar. After a long moment, he typed, Whitmore Industries safety record. The results loaded. He read through them methodically. The OSHA violations from 3 months ago, the corrective actions taken. The follow-up inspections that showed compliance. Nothing catastrophic. Nothing that suggested systemic problems. But also nothing that suggested they had the kind of safety culture that would prevent future issues. That's where someone like him would come in. Someone who knew how to build protocols, train staff, create systems that caught problems before they became disasters. Someone who wouldn't sign off on anything unsafe. His phone rang. Unknown number. Again. This time, Ethan answered without hesitation. Hello. Ethan, it's Vanessa. He sat up straighter. Hey, I know it's Saturday night and you probably have better things to do than talk to me, but I wanted to follow up on my message. I got it. I've been thinking. And? Ethan looked at Emma's bedroom door, at the quiet apartment, at the life he'd carefully built from the wreckage of his old one. I need to ask you something, he said, and I need you to be honest. Okay. The OSHA violations from 3 months ago. The maintenance lapses at your distribution center. Why did those happen? Vanessa was quiet for a moment. We were understaffed, growing too fast, cutting corners to keep up with demand. I didn't realize how bad it had gotten until the inspectors showed up. And now? Now we've hired more people, implemented better oversight, put protocols in place. But protocols only work if someone enforces them. That's what you want me for. Enforcement.
I want you to build a culture where cutting corners isn't an option, where safety is the default, not the exception. She paused. I can't do that alone. I need someone who understands the stakes, someone who's proven they'll make the hard choice even when it costs them. Ethan closed his eyes. What if I find problems you can't afford to fix?
Then we have a conversation about priorities and timelines, but we fix them. Her voice was firm. I'm not asking you to compromise. I'm asking you to help me build something better. And Marcus? He made it pretty clear he doesn't want me there. Marcus doesn't make hiring decisions. I do. Vanessa's tone shifted, harder. He told me about your meeting at the diner, about his threats. For what it's worth, I'm sorry. That wasn't appropriate. He's protecting his interests. He's protecting his ego. There's a difference. She sighed. Look, I'm not going to pretend working here will be easy. Marcus will fight you. Some of the other executives will resent you. Change is uncomfortable, and you'll be asking people to change. Sounds awful. It will be. But it'll also matter, and I think you missed that. Ethan opened his eyes and looked around his apartment. The worn furniture, the framed drawings Emma had made, the life that was small and safe and maybe not quite enough anymore. Can I ask you something else? Sure. Do you have kids? The question seemed to catch her off guard. No. Why? Because I have a daughter who needs me to be present, not just physically, but mentally. If I take this job and it consumes me the way my old career did, I'll lose her, and I can't. His voice caught. I can't lose anything else. Vanessa was quiet for a long time. When she spoke again, her voice was softer. My father used to work 18-hour days, built his company from nothing, poured everything into it. By the time I was old enough to notice, he was a stranger who occasionally slept in our house. She paused. I swore I'd never do that I'd never let work become more important than life. And then I took over the company and did exactly the same thing. So what changed? Nothing. That's the problem. She laughed, but there was no humor in it. I'm telling you this because I don't want you to make my mistakes. This job should fit into your life, not consume it. If I ever push you to choose work over your daughter, I want you to push back. Deal? Ethan thought about Emma, about the way she'd looked at him that morning with complete confidence that he was good at what he did, about the way she'd fallen asleep against his shoulder, trusting him to be there. Deal, he said. So, is that a yes? He took a breath. It's a yes, but I have conditions. I'm listening. I work regular hours, 8 to 5, maybe some flexibility around Emma's school schedule. No nights unless it's a genuine emergency, and even then I need notice. Done. I report directly to you, not Marcus. If there's a safety issue, I need to know I can escalate it without going through someone who's going to bury it. Agreed. And if I find something unsafe, I shut it down. No compromises, no negotiations. If you can't live with that, we stop this conversation right now. Vanessa didn't hesitate. That's exactly what I want you to do. Ethan felt something loosen in his chest. Okay, then I'll take the job. Really? Really, when do you want me to start? How about Monday? That gives you tomorrow to process everything and say goodbye to the night shift. Monday works. They talked for another 20 minutes about logistics, salary, benefits, office setup. The numbers Vanessa quoted made Ethan's head spin. It was more than 3 times what he made as a janitor, enough to move to a better apartment, enough to stop worrying about whether he could afford new shoes for Emma. When they finally hung up, Ethan sat in the quiet living room for a long time, trying to reconcile the decision he'd just made with the fear still sitting in his stomach. Then he got up, walked to Emma's room, and watched her sleep for a while. I think I just did something brave, he whispered. Or really stupid. Maybe both. Emma didn't answer, but Mr. Button stared at him from the pillow with what might have been judgment or encouragement. Hard to tell with a stuffed bear. Ethan went to bed that night feeling like he'd stepped off a cliff and wasn't sure if he'd land or fall. Sunday was supposed to be restful. Instead, Ethan spent most of it anxious. He took Emma to the park in the morning, pushed her on the swings until his arms hurt, and tried not to think about what Monday would bring. Emma seemed to sense something was different because she kept asking if he was okay. I'm fine, Bug. You don't look fine. You look worried. I'm just thinking. About what? Grown-up stuff. She made a face. Grown-up stuff is boring. You have no idea. That afternoon, Ethan did something he hadn't done in 3 years. He pulled out his old work clothes. The button-down shirts and slacks he'd worn to inspection sites, the steel-toed boots that still fit, the leather portfolio that had once held certificates and clipboards. Everything smelled like storage and old decisions. He tried on one of the shirts. It was looser than he remembered. He'd lost weight working nights, eating irregularly, running on stress and coffee, but it still fit, still looked professional. Emma appeared in his doorway. You look fancy. I have a new job starting tomorrow. The airplane job? Yeah. She studied him seriously. Are you going to stop being a janitor? Looks like it. Does that mean you won't come home smelling like cleaning stuff anymore? Ethan smiled. Probably. Good. It made my nose itch. She wandered off, apparently satisfied with this explanation. Ethan looked at himself in the mirror one more time. The man staring back looked familiar but distant, like someone he used to know before everything went wrong. Here we go, he said to his reflection. His phone buzzed. A message from Sarah. Sarah Nguyen. Heard you're leaving night shift, taking the Whitmore job? Ethan hesitated, then replied, Yeah. Start Monday. Sarah. Good. You were wasted pushing a broom, but you're going to be missed around here. Ethan. Thanks. For everything. The teaching gig, too. Sarah. Anytime. And hey, if Whitmore doesn't work out, we've always got a spot for you in the hangar. It was meant to be reassuring, but it made Ethan's stomach clench. The idea that this might not work out, that he might fail again, that he might end up right back where he started. He shook off the thought and went to make dinner. That night, after Emma was asleep, Ethan sat at the kitchen table and wrote something he hadn't written in years. A resignation letter. It was simple. One paragraph thanking Crestline for the opportunity, explaining he was moving to a new position, providing 2 weeks' notice even though he suspected they'd let him go sooner. He read it over 3 times, then sent it to HR. Done. No going back now. He tried to sleep but couldn't. His mind kept running scenarios. What if Marcus sabotaged him before he even started? What if he found problems Vanessa couldn't afford to fix? What if he failed and lost everything again? Around 2 a.m., he gave up on sleep and went to the living room, sat on the couch in the dark, and stared at nothing. His phone lit up with a message. Vanessa Whitmore. Can't sleep either. Nervous about tomorrow? Ethan stared at the message, surprised. Then he typed back, Yeah, you? Vanessa. Terrified. Haven't hired someone this important in years. What if I'm wrong about you? Ethan. What if I'm wrong about me? Vanessa. Then we'll figure it out together. That's what partnerships are for. Ethan smiled despite himself. Is that what this is? A partnership? Vanessa. You're head of aviation safety. I'm the CEO. If we're not partners, we're doing this wrong. They texted back and forth for another 20 minutes. Small talk, nervous energy. The kind of conversation that happened when 2 people were both awake at absurd hours for the same reason. Finally, Vanessa wrote, Get some sleep. Tomorrow's going to be intense. Ethan. You too. Vanessa. Deal. Ethan set down his phone and realized, with some surprise, that he felt better. Not calm, exactly, but less alone. He went back to bed, and this time sleep came. Monday morning arrived with clear skies and a knot in Ethan's stomach that wouldn't untangle. He got Emma ready for school like always, but everything felt different. He wore one of the button-down shirts, the good boots, the version of himself he hadn't seen in years. Emma noticed immediately. You look important, she said, eating her cereal. I feel weird. Weird how? Like I'm pretending to be someone I'm not. Emma considered this with the gravity of someone much older. Mrs. Chen says sometimes you have to pretend until it feels real. When did she say that? When I was scared about my first day of school. She said to pretend I was brave until I actually felt brave. Ethan ruffled her hair. Mrs. Chen's pretty smart. I know. That's why I listened to her. He dropped Emma at school, watched her run inside without looking back, and drove to Whitmore Industries with his hands tight on the steering wheel. The parking garage looked different in daylight. More crowded, more professional, more like the kind of place where people made important decisions. Ethan parked in a visitor spot. He didn't have an assigned space yet, and sat in the truck for a solid minute trying to breathe. Then he got out, grabbed his portfolio, and walked inside. The lobby was busy with Monday morning energy. Ethan checked in at reception, same woman as before, though she looked slightly more impressed by him in business clothes, and took the elevator to the 22nd floor. Linda Marsh was waiting when he stepped out. "Welcome to your first day. You ready?" "Not even a little," she smiled. "Honest, I like that. Come on, I'll show you your office." His office turned out to be down the hall from Vanessa's, smaller but still nice, with a window view and furniture that didn't look like it came from a discount warehouse. There was a computer already set up, a phone with more buttons than seemed necessary, and a nameplate on the desk that read Ethan Cade, Head of Aviation Safety and Compliance. Seeing his name like that made everything suddenly, terrifyingly real. "Vanessa's in meetings until 10, Linda said. "But she wanted me to get you started with onboarding paperwork and system access. Think you can handle that?" "Yeah, thanks." Linda left him with a stack of forms and a login credential sheet. Ethan sat down at his new desk in his new office and stared at the nameplate for a long time. Then he got to work. The morning passed in a blur of paperwork, password resets, and introductions to people whose names he immediately forgot. HR walked him through benefits. IT set up his email. Facilities gave him a key card. By the time Vanessa appeared in his doorway at 10:15, Ethan felt like he'd been through a bureaucratic marathon. "How's it going?" she asked. "I've signed my name so many times I'm not sure it's mine anymore." She smiled. "Welcome to corporate life. You ready for the real work?" "Depends what the real work is." "Meeting the team, starting with the people who are going to hate you." Ethan stood. "Marcus?" "Among others." "Come on, let's get this over with." She led him to a conference room where 5 people were already waiting, Marcus and 4 others Ethan didn't recognize. All of them wore expressions that ranged from curious to hostile. Vanessa took a seat at the head of the table and gestured for Ethan to sit beside her. "Everyone, this is Ethan Cade. As of today, he's our head of aviation safety and compliance. Ethan, meet the executive team." She went around the table. Marcus, he knew. The others were VP of Operations, VP of Finance, Director of Fleet Management, and someone from legal whose title Ethan didn't catch. Nobody looked particularly happy to meet him. Marcus spoke first. "I have to say, Vanessa, I'm surprised you moved forward with this hire, without consulting the rest of us. I don't need to consult anyone on safety hires. That's my decision. Even when the hire has a history of shutting down operations." Ethan felt every eye turn to him. "That's not accurate," he said evenly. "I've never shut down an operation. I've refused to certify unsafe aircraft. There's a difference." The VP of Operations, a broad-shouldered man named Richard, leaned forward. "Semantics. Point is, we can't afford someone who's going to ground planes every time they find a loose bolt. If the bolt's loose enough to be a safety risk, the plane should be grounded. And who decides what qualifies as a safety risk?" "I do. That's the job." Richard's expression darkened. "With all due respect, gentlemen." Vanessa's voice cut through the tension like a blade. "Let me be very clear. Ethan reports to me. His job is to ensure we operate safely, not profitably, not efficiently, safely. If that's a problem for anyone, we can discuss it privately." The room went quiet. Marcus sat back in his chair, his expression unreadable. The others looked uncomfortable but didn't argue. Vanessa turned to Ethan. "Anything you want to add?" He thought about it. Thought about all the things he could say to try to win these people over, to make them trust him. Then he decided honesty was better. "I'm not here to make your lives harder," he said. "But I'm also not going to pretend something's safe when it's not. If we work together, this goes smoothly. If we don't, it's going to be painful for everyone. Your choice." Nobody responded. The meeting wrapped up shortly after that. As people filed out, Marcus lingered near the door, catching Ethan's eye. "This isn't over," he said quietly. "I didn't think it was." Marcus left. Vanessa waited until they were alone. That could have gone worse. Could it? Richard almost threw a chair once, so yeah. Despite everything, Ethan smiled. "What now?" "Now you get to work. I need a full safety audit of our aviation division, aircraft, maintenance protocols, training programs, everything. I want to know where we're vulnerable. How long do I have? How long do you need? Couple weeks? Maybe 3? You've got 2. After that, we'll sit down and figure out what needs to change. She stood. Welcome to Whitmore Industries, Ethan. Try not to let Marcus drive you crazy. No promises. She left him alone in the conference room. Ethan sat there for a moment, processing everything that had just happened. Then he pulled out his phone and texted Emma. Ethan, first day going okay. Miss you. The response came almost immediately, probably Mrs. Chen using Emma's account. Emma, we miss you too. Don't work too hard. Love you, Daddy. Ethan smiled and put his phone away. Then he went back to his office and got to work figuring out how to save a company that wasn't sure it wanted to be saved. The safety audit took Ethan exactly 13 days. 13 days of crawling through maintenance logs, interviewing mechanics, inspecting aircraft at 3 different facilities, and discovering that Whitmore Industries' aviation division had more problems than anyone wanted to admit. Nothing catastrophic. Nothing that would drop a plane out of the sky tomorrow, but enough small cracks that if left unchecked, would eventually add up to something terrible. Ethan documented everything in a report that grew longer each day. By day 10, it was 40 pages. By day 13, it had ballooned to 72, complete with photographs, maintenance records, and a cost estimate that made his stomach hurt just looking at it. He finished the final draft on a Thursday night at his kitchen table, Emma asleep in the next room, cold coffee growing a skin in the mug beside his laptop. The total cost to fix everything, just over $2 million. $2 million Vanessa might not have. $2 million Marcus would absolutely fight. $2 million that could cost Ethan this job before he'd even gotten comfortable in the chair. He closed the laptop and stared at the dark window, seeing his reflection stare back. This was the moment. The same moment he'd faced in Seattle 6 years ago, when he'd had to choose between his career and his conscience. Back then, he'd chosen conscience and lost everything. Now he had to choose it again. Except this time, it wasn't just about him. It was about Emma, about the stability they'd only just started building, about whether he could afford to be the person who wouldn't compromise. His phone buzzed. A text from Vanessa. Vanessa Whitmore. Report ready? Ethan. Yeah. You're not going to like it. Vanessa. Never expected to. My office, 9 a.m. tomorrow. Just us. Ethan set down his phone and went to check on Emma one last time before bed. She was sprawled across her mattress, covers kicked off, Mr. Buttons wedged under her chin. He pulled the blanket back over her and kissed her forehead. Whatever happens, he whispered, I did the right thing. Emma didn't answer, but her breathing stayed steady and peaceful, and that was enough. Vanessa's office at 9 a.m. felt different than it had 2 weeks ago. Less intimidating, maybe, or maybe Ethan was just too tired to be nervous anymore. She sat behind her desk, coffee in hand, looking like she'd already been working for hours. Probably had been. Let's see it, she said. Ethan handed her a printed copy of the report. She took it, flipped to the executive summary at the front, and read in silence. Her expression didn't change, didn't flicker, just steady focus, line by line. After a few minutes, she looked up. $2 million. Give or take, that's worst case scenario. We could phase the repairs over 18 months, prioritize critical items first. What's critical? Ethan pulled out a separate sheet, the list he'd made ranking everything by urgency. 3 aircraft have hydraulic systems that need complete overhauls. Not immediately dangerous, but degrading faster than normal. 6 months, maybe less, before they start throwing fault codes. If we wait too long, we're looking at in-flight failures. Vanessa's fingers tightened on the paper. How did we miss this? Maintenance schedules were being stretched to save money. Systems that should be inspected every 200 flight hours were going 300, sometimes more. Small problems became bigger problems. Whose decision was that? Records show it came from operations, Richard's department. She was quiet for a moment, then, keep going. Ethan walked her through the rest, training gaps in the maintenance staff, outdated diagnostic equipment, protocols that hadn't been updated in 5 years. None of it individually catastrophic, but together it painted a picture of an aviation division running on borrowed time. When he finished, Vanessa set down the report and rubbed her temples. $2 million, she repeated. We just spent $400 million on the Tokyo merger. Our cash reserves are lower than I'd like. This is going to hurt. I know. Marcus is going to fight me on this. I know that too. She looked at him. If I told you we could only afford half the repairs, that we had to make choices about what gets fixed and what gets deferred, what would you say? This was the test. Ethan knew it, could feel the weight of it settling over the room. He thought about Emma, about rent and groceries and the stability he'd promised her, about what would happen if he gave the wrong answer and lost this job. Then he thought about the hundreds of people who'd fly on those aircraft, trusting that someone had made sure they were safe. I'd say fix the hydraulic systems first, he said quietly. They're the immediate risk. Everything else we can phase in over time. But those 3 aircraft ground until the work's done, or we're gambling with people's lives. Vanessa held his gaze. Even if grounding them costs us contracts? Even then. She nodded slowly. That's what I thought you'd say. Are you firing me? What? No. She stood up, walked to the window. I'm trying to figure out how to sell this to the board without them having a collective heart attack. Ethan felt something unclench in his chest. So you're going to do it? The repairs? All of them. Not because I want to spend $2 million I don't really have, but because you're right. She turned back to him. I hired you to tell me the truth even when it's expensive. This is expensive as hell, but it's also necessary. Marcus is going to make this difficult. Let me worry about Marcus. Vanessa returned to her desk, picked up her phone. I'm calling an emergency executive meeting for this afternoon. I want you there. You're going to present the findings, answer questions, and not back down when they push back. Can you do that? Ethan thought about the last time he'd presented findings that people didn't want to hear, about the way his supervisor had looked at him like he'd betrayed the company, about the investigation that followed and the career that ended. Yeah, he said. I can do that. Good. 2 p.m., conference room. Bring copies of the report for everyone. She started typing an email. Ethan stood to leave, then paused. Vanessa? Yeah? Thank you for trusting me. She looked up, and for a moment her professional mask slipped. Thank you for being worth trusting. The executive meeting at 2 p.m. was every bit as bad as Ethan had expected. He'd barely finished his presentation, a condensed version of the report, focusing on the critical issues, when Richard from operations interrupted. This is absurd. You're talking about grounding aircraft based on theoretical risks. Not theoretical, Ethan said calmly. The hydraulic degradation is measurable. I have the inspection data right here. Data that could be interpreted multiple ways. Not by anyone who understands hydraulic systems. Richard's face reddened. Are you suggesting I don't understand? I'm suggesting the maintenance schedules were stretched beyond safe limits, and now we're paying for it. Marcus leaned forward. The schedules were adjusted to maximize operational efficiency. That's standard practice in the industry. It's standard practice until something fails. Ethan pulled out his laptop, turned it toward the table. This is a hydraulic line from aircraft N247. You can see the stress fractures forming along the coupling. Give it another 100 flight hours and this fails mid-flight. The VP of Finance, a thin woman named Caroline, studied the image. How certain are you? Certain enough to ground my own family on that plane. The room went quiet. Caroline looked at Vanessa. What's the financial impact of grounding 3 aircraft? We lose 2 contracts, delay a third, total revenue impact around $800,000 over the next quarter. And the repair costs? $2 million phased over 18 months. Caroline did the math in her head. That's a significant hit to our margins. It's a bigger hit if one of those aircraft goes down, Ethan said. Marcus slammed his hand on the table. This is exactly what I warned you about, Vanessa. You hire someone with a hero complex and suddenly we're hemorrhaging money over problems that might never materialize. They're not hypothetical, Ethan said, his voice hardening. I've seen what happens when companies defer maintenance to save money. People die. And when they do, everyone asks why nobody saw it coming. Well, I'm seeing it right now, and I'm telling you. Based on your interpretation, based on 12 years as an FAA inspector and more aircraft certifications than everyone in this room combined. The room went silent again. Vanessa looked around the table. Anyone else have questions about the technical findings? Nobody spoke. Then here's what's going to happen. We ground the 3 aircraft Ethan identified. We begin repairs immediately. We phase in the remaining work over 18 months, prioritized by safety impact. She met each person's eyes. This isn't a debate. This is what we're doing. Richard started to protest. Vanessa cut him off. Richard, your department created this problem by stretching maintenance schedules. Don't make it worse by fighting the solution. His mouth opened, then closed. Marcus stood. I'd like to speak with you privately, Vanessa. No, anything you have to say, you can say here. Marcus's jaw worked. This is a mistake. You're letting one person with a grudge against efficiency derail our operations. I'm letting a safety expert do his job. If you can't support that, we have a bigger problem. For a moment, Ethan thought Marcus might actually walk out, but he just stood there, fury barely contained, before finally sitting back down. The meeting ended shortly after. People filed out in uncomfortable silence. Ethan started gathering his papers when Vanessa touched his arm. Wait. He waited until the room was empty. You okay? She asked. I've been better. That was brutal. Yeah. But you held your ground. That matters. Ethan looked at her. Does it? Or did I just paint a target on my back? Probably both. She smiled faintly. Welcome to leadership. It's mostly making hard choices and hoping you survive them. The repairs started the following Monday. Ethan spent most of his time at the maintenance facility, overseeing the work, answering questions, making sure the mechanics understood exactly what needed to be done. It was tedious, exhausting work that reminded him why he'd loved this job and why he'd hated it. But watching the hydraulic systems get replaced, seeing the stress fractures removed before they could fail, that part felt good. Like he was preventing something terrible instead of just documenting it after the fact. Sarah showed up on day 3, ostensibly to check on a different aircraft, but really to see how Ethan was holding up. Heard you pissed off half the executive team, she said. Just doing my job. Yeah, well, your job's making waves. She handed him a coffee. For what it's worth, the mechanics are talking. Word is you found problems nobody else wanted to see. That's one way to put it. It's the right way. Sarah looked at the aircraft being worked on. I've been doing this 20 years. I've seen what happens when companies cut corners. It's never worth it. Try telling that to the finance people. I'd rather tell it to you, because you need to hear that you're doing the right thing, even when it's hard. Ethan took the coffee. Thanks. Don't thank me. Just don't quit. We need people like you. She left him with that. The repairs took 11 days total. When the final hydraulic system passed inspection, Ethan signed off on the paperwork with a sense of relief so profound he almost laughed. 3 aircraft, safe again. $2 million spent. 0 lives lost because someone decided saving money was more important than doing things right. He called Vanessa from the facility. It's done. All 3 aircraft are airworthy. Thank you, Ethan. Seriously. Just doing what you hired me for. I know, but it still means something. That night, Ethan got home at a reasonable hour for the first time in 2 weeks. Emma was doing homework at the kitchen table, Mrs. Chen sitting with her. Daddy, Emma jumped up. You're home early. Finished a big project. Thought we could celebrate. With waffles. Ethan laughed. Yeah, with waffles. Mrs. Chen stood, gathering her things. I'll leave you 2 alone. Thanks for watching her. Always. She paused at the door. You look better, less tired. I feel better. Good. That job is good for you. After she left, Ethan and Emma made waffles together, real ones, from scratch, with chocolate chips because Emma insisted. They ate at the kitchen table, Emma telling him about her day at school, about the drawing she'd made in art class, about the boy who'd tried to take Mr. Buttons at recess. Normal things. Good things. Halfway through dinner, Emma looked at him seriously. Are you happy, Daddy? The question caught him off guard. What? You've been working a lot, but you seem different. Happier, maybe. Are you? Ethan thought about it. About the stress and the fights with Marcus and the $2 million repairs that had nearly given him an ulcer, but also about fixing things that mattered, about using skills he'd thought were dead, about making a difference instead of just surviving. Yeah, Bug, I think I am, Emma smiled. Good. Because when you're happy, I'm happy. She went back to her waffles, oblivious to the way those words had just cracked something open in Ethan's chest. 3 weeks after the repairs were completed, Vanessa called Ethan into her office. "Close the door," she said. He did, suddenly nervous. Her expression was unreadable. "I'm going to ask you something, and I need you to be honest." "Okay. Do you trust me?" Ethan blinked. "What? Do you trust me, as your boss, as a partner in this? Do you trust that I'll back you when things get hard?" He thought about the executive meeting, about the way she'd shut down Marcus and Richard without hesitation, about the $2 million she'd spent because he'd told her it was necessary. "Yeah, I do." "Good. Because I need you to trust me on this." She pulled a folder from her desk. "I'm firing Marcus." The words hung in the air. "What?" "I've been watching him since you came on. The way he undermines decisions, the way he fights every safety measure, the way he's been spreading rumors that you're going to bankrupt the company." She opened the folder. "And then I found this." She slid a document across the desk. Ethan read it, then read it again, not quite believing what he was seeing. It was an email chain between Marcus and Richard, discussing how to discredit Ethan's audit findings, how to convince the board that the repairs were unnecessary, how to get Ethan removed before he cost the company any more money. "He's been actively working against safety measures," Vanessa said quietly. "Against you. Against everything we're trying to build here. I can't have that. Firing your COO is a big move. I know. But keeping him is bigger risk." She met his eyes. "I hired you because I wanted someone who'd tell me the truth. You've done that. Now I'm returning the favor. Marcus has to go." Ethan set down the document. "When?" "Today. I'm meeting with him in an hour. I wanted you to know first." "How can I help?" Vanessa smiled faintly. "You already did, by being good at your job. The rest is on me." Marcus was gone by end of business that day. Vanessa made the announcement in a company-wide email. Brief, professional, thanking him for his service and wishing him well. The reaction was mixed. Some people seemed relieved. Others looked nervous, like they weren't sure what this meant for the company's direction. Ethan tried to stay out of the speculation, but it was impossible to miss the looks he got in the hallways. Some respectful, some resentful, all of them aware that he'd somehow become the person who'd changed everything. That Friday, Vanessa asked him to stay late. "I need your advice on something," she said. They were in her office, the sun setting through the windows, the building mostly empty. "I'm looking at candidates to replace Marcus. Want to know what you think?" She showed him 3 resumes, all impressive, all qualified, all people who'd spent their careers climbing corporate ladders. Ethan read through them carefully. Then he set them down. "None of these people will push back when you need them to." Vanessa raised an eyebrow. "And you know this how?" "Because they're all professional yes people. Look at their career trajectories. They've survived by agreeing with leadership, not challenging it." He tapped one of the resumes. "This guy worked under a CEO who later went to prison for fraud. You really think he was speaking up about problems?" "Fair point." She gathered the resumes. "So who would you hire? Someone who's failed before. Someone who knows what it costs to make the hard choice and did it anyway." He paused. "Someone who'll tell you when you're wrong." Vanessa studied him. "Like you?" "I'm not looking for a promotion." "I know, that's why you'd be good at it." Ethan shook his head. "I'm serious. I like what I'm doing. I like fixing problems, not managing people who fix problems." "Fair enough?" She leaned back in her chair. "Can I tell you something?" "Sure." "When my father handed me this company, I was terrified. Not of failing. I knew I could handle failure. I was terrified of succeeding by becoming someone I didn't recognize, someone who valued profit over people, growth over integrity." She looked out at the sunset. "I swore I wouldn't do that. And then I almost did, because that's what everyone expected. That's what the board wanted, what the shareholders wanted. What changed? You did. When you walked into that hangar at 5 in the morning and told my mechanics they were fixing the wrong thing. That was the first time in years someone told me a truth I didn't want to hear. And you were right." She turned back to him. "You reminded me why I took this job in the first place, not to make money, to build something that mattered." Ethan didn't know what to say to that. Vanessa stood, walked to the window. "I'm not saying this job is easy or that we've fixed everything. We've still got problems, still got people who think safety is negotiable, but at least now we're trying, and that's because of you." I just did what anyone should do. But most people don't. That's the difference. They stood there in comfortable silence for a while, watching the city lights flicker on as darkness settled in. Finally, Ethan said, I should get home. Emma's waiting. How is she? Good. Really good, actually. She likes that I'm home for dinner now. That's what matters. Ethan headed for the door, then stopped. Vanessa? Yeah? Thank you for taking a chance on me. She smiled. Thank you for being worth it. 6 months later, Ethan stood in the Crestline Aviation hangar where everything had started, watching mechanics complete a routine inspection on a Whitmore Industries aircraft. He'd been invited back to teach another seminar, this one about building safety culture, about creating systems where people felt empowered to speak up about problems instead of hiding them. Sarah met him at the entrance. Look who's back, Mr. Big Shot Head of Safety. Ethan laughed. I'm not a big shot. You're bigger than you were. Heard you fired Marcus Chen. Vanessa fired Marcus. I just found the problems he was trying to hide. Same thing. She handed him a coffee. Your seminar's in 20 minutes. Got a good turnout. 30 people. 30? Last time it was 12. Word spreads. People want to learn from the guy who grounded 3 aircraft and convinced a CEO to spend $2 million. She grinned. You're kind of famous. I'm really not. But walking into that training room and seeing 30 mechanics waiting to hear what he had to say, that felt like something. Like proof that maybe the hard choices had been worth it. He taught for 3 hours, answering questions, sharing stories, talking about the difference between following procedures and understanding why those procedures existed. About the responsibility that came with working on machines that carried people's lives. Afterward, a young mechanic approached him. Couldn't have been more than 25. Can I ask you something? Sure. How do you know when to speak up? When you see something that might be wrong, but you're not sure. Ethan thought about that morning 6 months ago, about the moment he'd decided to step out of the shadows and say something. You speak up when staying quiet would bother you more than the consequences of talking. When you know that if something goes wrong, you'll never forgive yourself for not trying. The young mechanic nodded slowly. That makes sense. Thanks. Ethan drove home that evening feeling like he'd accomplished something real. Not big, not flashy, but real. Emma was waiting on the porch when he pulled up. Mrs. Chen must have let her watch for him. She ran to the truck before he'd even turned off the engine. Daddy, can we go to the airport tomorrow? The airport, why? Because I want to see the airplanes, the big ones. You always talk about them, and I want to see what you see. Ethan looked at his daughter, 6 years old, curious, fearless in the way kids were before the world taught them to be careful. Yeah, Bug, we can go to the airport. The next day was Saturday. Ethan took Emma to the public observation area at the main terminal, where they sat on a bench and watched planes take off and land. Emma asked 1,000 questions. What kind of plane was that? Where was it going? How did it stay in the air? Why were the wings shaped like that? Ethan answered each one, watching her face light up with understanding, seeing the world through her eyes for the first time in years. Do you still miss it? She asked during a quiet moment. Working at the airport before? Sometimes, but I like what I do now better. Why? Because now I get to fix things before they break instead of just checking if they're broken, and because I get to come home to you every night. Emma leaned against his shoulder. I like when you come home. Me too, Bug. They sat there for another hour, watching the sky, and Ethan realized something he probably should have known all along. He didn't need to choose between having a career and having a life. He didn't need to sacrifice everything to do work that mattered. He just needed to be brave enough to do both. 3 months after that, Whitmore Industries announced record safety ratings across their entire aviation division. 0 incidents, 0 violations, and a reputation for being one of the most safety-conscious operators in the industry. Vanessa sent the announcement to Ethan with a simple message. This is because of you. He sent back, this is because of us. That evening, Ethan sat at his kitchen table, the same table where he'd written his resignation from Crestline, where he'd drafted the safety audit that changed everything, where he and Emma made waffles on Saturday mornings. Emma was asleep in the next room. The apartment was quiet. Ethan pulled out the business card Vanessa had given him that first morning, the one he'd almost thrown away. He looked at it for a long time, remembering the person he'd been 6 months ago, scared, hiding, convinced that the world had nothing left to offer him. Then he looked at the person he'd become. Not perfect, still scared sometimes, still making it up as he went, but trying, fighting, refusing to compromise on the things that mattered. He put the card in a drawer and closed it. Some doors, once you walked through them, didn't need to stay open. You just needed to remember that you'd been brave enough to walk through in the first place. Outside, the city hummed with Saturday night energy. Inside, everything was quiet and safe and exactly where it needed to be. Ethan turned off the lights and went to check on Emma one last time. She was sprawled across her bed, Mr. Buttons tucked under her chin, dreaming whatever dreams 6-year-olds dreamed. He kissed her forehead and whispered, "We did okay, Bug. We did okay." And for the first time in 3 years, he actually believed it. Because sometimes the hardest thing wasn't knowing what to do. It was having the courage to do it. To risk everything you'd carefully built for the chance to build something better. To trust that the person you used to be could exist alongside the person you'd become. To believe that broken things, careers, dreams, lives, could be fixed if you were willing to do the work. Ethan had done the work. Had stood up when it would have been easier to stay silent. Had told the truth when lies would have been more profitable. Had chosen integrity over comfort, safety over shortcuts, doing what was right over doing what was easy. And in return, he'd gotten his life back. Not the same life. That was gone, buried with Rachel and the career he'd lost in Seattle. But a new life. A better one, maybe. One where he came home to his daughter every night. Where he fixed problems that mattered. Where he worked for someone who valued truth over convenience. Where he could look at himself in the mirror and recognize the person staring back. That was worth more than any salary, any title, any measure of success the world might offer. It was worth everything. Ethan closed Emma's door quietly and walked to his own room. Tomorrow they'd make waffles. Monday, he'd go back to work, to the endless task of keeping aircraft safe and people honest. The job would be hard, the fights would continue, and there would be days when he questioned whether it was worth it. But tonight, in the quiet of his daughter's peaceful breathing and the knowledge that he'd done something that mattered, Ethan Cade, former inspector, former janitor, current head of aviation safety, full-time father, allowed himself to feel something he hadn't felt in a very long time. Hope. And that, he thought as sleep finally pulled him under, was more than enough.